Death Stranding is a game developed by Kojima Productions and released for the PlayStation 4 in 2019. Regarded as the first Strand-type game, Death Stranding had an incredibly hyped-up marketing campaign, followed by one of the most polarizing video game releases of the last decade. Some reviewers loved it, others hated it, and at the time, it seemed like there was really no in between.
Death Stranding is one of the most disappointing video games I have ever played.
Because make no mistake, Death Stranding is absolutely remarkable. I have played everything that Kojima has made since Metal Gear 1. I have no hesitation in telling you that this is both his best game and his greatest accomplishment.
But it's all been saddled on a backbone made of repetitive mission design and arduous traversal that simply can't support its weight over the full course of the journey.
It never stops being about the sheer power and purpose we can find in human connection, and that is its most remarkable achievement.
For me though, I love those type of experiences in one way or another. I love going into a new experience, like a movie or a game, without knowing what to think. It reminded me a lot of another polarizing game launch, which was The Last of Us Part 2, another game of which I absolutely love. But that game already had a baseline level of gameplay elements that I already knew I was going to like, especially since it's a sequel. Death Stranding was being advertised as an entirely new genre of game, which ended up not really being true, but it was still unlike anything people have ever played before. It really seemed like it was a truly fresh, original experience, and I was super excited for that. However, when it came out, I missed the release mostly because of the reviews. I also didn't have the money at the time to buy it full price, and with the release of the next generation PlayStation coming up, I decided to wait until then to play it. Well, with the release of the sequel, I figured it was finally time to check out Death Stranding. Is it worth the hype, or is it an overzealous project made by a guy with no reins? Let's take a look. Years prior to the release of the game, Hideo Kojima was already well known in the industry for his unique and bold vision in redefining what a video game could be. His early work on Snatcher and the first two Metal Gear games on the MSX were already indicative of a game director that knew that they wanted to be different, and they wanted the industry to change with them. With the release of Metal Gear Solid on the PlayStation 1, the rest of the world started to see that vision. It was cinematic, it was epic, and it was iconic, all with an excellent and unique gameplay system that tied it all together. It was a smash hit with critics and fans alike, and the world wanted more. Kojima spent most of his years in the industry at a game company called Konami, mostly because it was the only game company that was listed on the stock market back in the 80s. During his 30 years spent there, he worked primarily on the Metal Gear franchise and its numerous sequels, but also worked on Zone of the Enders and the Castlevania reboot series on the PS3 and 360. But his relationship with Konami started to sour when a change in leadership and priorities led to Kojima getting pushed out of the company in 2015. High budget and delay concerns with his magnum opus Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain led the executives at Konami to grow frustrated with his leadership style. The company also wanted to shift focus from high-budget video games to mobile gaming, casino gaming, and health and fitness-related products. After the release of Phantom Pain in 2015, he left in December of that year. After leaving, he gathered a handful of people he worked with closely at Konami and formed Kojima Productions, and started to work on a brand new game. He quickly learned that funding a new independent game studio is very expensive, so he drew upon the connections he had made in the industry to help him fund his next project. Initially, he didn't want to tell anybody about the details of the game he was brainstorming because he was fearful that studios would want to interfere early in development, but that naturally came at the cost of publishers not trusting him entirely to make what he wanted to make. Finally, Sony met up with Kojima and essentially gave him a blank check and said, make whatever you want, just make the game exclusive on the PlayStation for a bit. His meeting with Sony went well, and they started to work on early ideas of what Death Stranding could be. During initial production though, Kojima's mother passed away, which gave him the idea and solidified the core central themes of the game that he wanted to make, which was connection, loss, and isolation. These themes are the backbone of the game, and they are seen in every instance of the experience. One of the things that immediately hooked players into the game was that first initial teaser trailer. It was mysterious, brooding, and most importantly, just plain weird. The trailer itself, mixed with Norman Reedus' naked body and Kojima's name all over the thing, was enough for people to be like, oh yeah, I'm sold. As more and more trailers were released, the more questions the audience had, and strangely enough, the more mysterious the game became. At a certain point for me though, I stopped watching the trailers entirely because I was ready to just experience the game for myself and figure out what the hell I was watching all alone. Death Stranding had one of the best marketing cycles for a game ever, in my opinion. Everyone online was speculating and trying to piece things together that they saw in the trailer. In the end though, the game led to be one of the most batshit insane worlds and stories we've ever experienced. I'm not going to explain everything here because that would just take forever, but its story and world is one thing that I was always trying to figure out, which was very engaging. The way the game starts and just sort of throws you into this world without much explanation felt a little bit overwhelming though, but after a few hours and picking up your orders, you do start to notice some patterns and reoccurring things to latch onto. While I really love the creativity in the world presented here, I have to say I wasn't all that engaged with the game's story or the characters very much. Everything just felt more to serve a greater theme rather than individual actual characters with personalities of their own. Sam is a fine character, but there's really not all that much personality to him that gets showcased here, despite playing as him the entire game. There was maybe one or two moments that I thought his personality shined through, but they were few and far between and also felt a little bit out of place at times. Amelie, Bridget, Fragile, Hartman, Die Hardman, and Deadman all kind of felt samey to me and not really all that interesting. The standout character for me though was absolutely Higgs, which was played by Troy Baker. Troy absolutely knew what kind of game he was in and he gave his 100% all to it. I love this character. So the main theme of the game here is connecting with each other, and Kojima does not want you to forget that. The whole story is centered around the idea that you're supposed to go to each outpost in the US and deliver packages in order to connect people to this chiral network, which is kind of like an internet. The theme of connection goes even beyond just story elements because it plays into the game's mechanics too, with tools like the rope and the bridges and the online component allowing you and other players to help each other out, working towards the same goals. Each of the main characters are also centered around this idea of connection, like with Cliff and his BB, the literal spiritual and physical connection that Mama and her baby have with the life and afterlife, and with Bridget and Amelie's link with the overworld and the beach. All of the characters are in like a big giant web of strands, all connecting to each other in some way, and Sam is at the very center of it. His arc is all about learning to connect with others and find room for people in his life. At the start of the game, he shuns humanity and tries to ignore his dying mother's final wish of reconnecting all of the outposts into one nation. He has no friends, no communication with his family, and lives in isolation because he literally cannot be around people, to the point where he will actually bruise up if somebody touches him. I feel as though Kojima wants to put people into this perspective, and he wanted Sam to act as a stand-in for the player. The themes here are not subtle at all, and I think that's kind of the intention. There's nothing of subtext here, everything is over-explained, and it's very similar in that way to Kojima's previous games in the Metal Gear series. So I think that because of that, for me, I didn't feel super, ironically enough, connected with the game's story or the characters. While I can acknowledge that the themes presented are great and I love the idea of a game existing that's just about connecting with people, I think just telling a story based on the themes just isn't really for me. The complex nature of the lore and the insistency to over-explain every detail in the game's world also just kind of threw me off a bit. It makes sense to do it in MGS to an extent, where it's a game about espionage and spies and lying and deceiving each other to get ahead, but when you dedicate so much dialogue and text to explain how when Sam takes a shower and shits and pisses that he gets grenades, it can get kind of exhausting after a point. The gameplay is probably the most unique thing about the game. It boils down to you picking up packages for delivery and traversing a large landscape in order to deliver them. The way you get there is totally up to you, which offers a lot of player expression. You can walk and enjoy the scenery, take a bike or truck, use structures that you or other people have created for you to quickly bypass certain areas, or just a combination of all of them. Death Stranding does one of the most unique things I've ever seen in a game, which is the act of traversing the land itself is an obstacle. In a game like Skyrim, the open world can be traversed in a few different ways, but the main challenge there are the enemies you may encounter, and that's really it. Death Stranding has the ground itself be the challenge. Sam will trip on random rocks, trek through the snow and rain, get caught up in dangerous river flows, encounter BTs or mules that stand in his way, and sometimes all of the above at the same time. Traversing the land requires a lot of planning and attention. You pick up a delivery at a terminal and get your order, and you get to pick out which equipment you want to bring for that journey. This can include tools like ladders, which can help you climb up huge mountains or traverse chasms and rivers, PCCs, which can be used to generate large structures like bridges, zip lines, generators, and more, and can also be seen and used by other players. You can also load up on weapons and gear like support skeletons, which can help you out with the package load or sprint speed. There's a lot of customization here, and it all plays into each other extremely well. Sometimes the issue will come up where you will load up on certain items and you'll encounter a situation where you need another item in order to bypass it. For example, you can load up on climbing equipment like ladders, anchors, PCCs, all that, if you see you're about to head into a rocky or snowy area, but when you get there, you notice there's BTs, and you don't have any grenades to deal with them. There's online signs that other players drop down to help out porters that are supposed to let you know what's coming up ahead, kind of like notes in Dark Souls, but it never really showed up for me until it was just too late. The signs and messages don't show up until you get a location connected to the chiral network anyways, so if you're doing a story mission or something like that where you have to go a large distance, you won't know what's up ahead until it's too late. You can't carry too many things with you either. Sam only has about 200 kilograms that he can load onto himself, but it's really more like 100 to 120 kilograms because the more weight he carries, the slower he goes and the more at risk he is for toppling over. You can mitigate that, however, by equipping power skeletons, which add more max weight to your body, or you can also load it up on a truck and drive with it. I really like this push and pull system. You obviously want to carry as much as you can, but you physically cannot, and so you have to make some hard decisions sometimes, which is super engaging. I also really love the idea that carry weight, which is another basic concept in open world games and RPGs, is a fully fleshed out mechanic here with real consequences to your gameplay. Driving is another main way of traversal in the game, but to be honest, it sure does not feel like it. Using vehicles in Death Stranding is one of the jankiest experiences I've ever had in a game. It honestly feels worse than Skyrim's horse mechanic. Driving in this game is a constant headache, as you have to constantly make sure that you don't drive over any rocks or deep rivers or else you'll get totally stuck. But the thing that makes it jank isn't that you get stuck, it's that you can unstuck yourself with a little bit of elbow grease and a lot of determination. Looking at the walking mechanics, it feels so precise, like all of the obstacles and animations that you go through feel intentionally there. Driving almost feels like an afterthought, and it doesn't even really make all that much sense to me, even in a world-building perspective. You have an extremely rugged terrain and advanced technology, and yet you can't create a vehicle that can go over all of that easily. I'll accept that there's no flying or drones or anything like that, but you can't just equip a bigger jumping mechanism for the cars and bikes. Anyways, with all that said, I still like driving in the game. It's fun, and honestly, traversing the landscape with these vehicles by trying to jam your way through these tiny-ass rocks and crevices still feels very rewarding when you get through it all. It's also just way more efficient to do so, even with all of the jank. In addition to that, there's also some stealth and combat mechanics here. I guess Kojima just couldn't shy away from stealth after all. In the game, you'll encounter two types of enemies: BTs and mules. BTs stand for beached things and are essentially ghosts. They are invisible to the naked eye, for most people anyways, unless you have a BB that can help you find and identify them. Sam has a special power called Dooms, which allows him to kill the BTs using various fluids from his body to turn them into weapons against the BTs. Yeah, it's kinda wild. For example, you can get these grenades that are made from his blood, or bullets that you can use in an assault rifle. Later on in the game, you can also sneak up behind them and sever their umbilical cord using your handcuffs. The BT encounters in this game are insanely creepy and weird. I did, however, feel like they overstood their welcome to an extent, and I never really looked forward to an encounter with them. It just felt a little bit too unfair to an extent. I mean, you do have all of these weapons to use against them, but not being able to see them felt very annoying. The mules are a different story. They are other humans in the world that just desperately want to get your packages no matter what. They use pretty much any mechanics that you would use, so that means they can drive, swim, run, and of course use weapons. This to me makes them much more engaging and fun to fight against than BTs, because you have that sort of kinetic energy when roaming into one of their bases and trying to loot them and survive and escape. I thought it was really fun. The combat in this game is clearly not the main focus, and for that reason, it doesn't feel as good as it probably could have been, but I think it still feels alright, and gives you enough variety to keep you entertained for about 40 hours or so. So despite all of its faults, I still really loved Death Stranding. There was a particular moment in this game that I think about all the time. It was in episode 2, just after the long BT encounter in the hills on the way to the port. After a very long journey, encountering mules, BTs, and trying to climb up rugged terrain all at the same time, a track played from the game's amazing soundtrack while I looked over the hill down to the city. It played as I had a much easier time getting down the hill, and something about that moment just made everything click for me. From there, I couldn't get enough of the game. I played it for hours at a time, was thinking about it when I went to work, and listening to the soundtrack during those times. Death Stranding is a game unlike anything I've played before, for better or for worse. I have to give Kojima Productions its credit for making something so bold, so fresh, and so bizarre in a world where AAA games all feel the same. I think that everyone who loves gaming should give this game a fair shot. And I mean a fair shot. Put a few hours into it at least. Really look into the mechanics and really try to learn about this game, because I think it really is something special. I give Death Stranding a 5 out of 5.